what's going on? It's your boys Sanchez and Cedric back on the mic with Token Confessions, hanging out, chilling, enjoying this very chill day, calm day, rather warm. I'm dressed like it's fall because my house stays pretty cold.
You know, I almost put on a light hoodie because of how cold it usually is in here.
Yeah.
I'm doing okay.
Well, I turned the AC off during lunch when I had a lunch meeting, and I hadn't turned it back on, but I got to turn it back on right when you leave because things will overheat, and I'm working on some projects. So, But we are back on the mic, and we're going to be talking about something that's been lingering a while that, honestly, I'm kind of over it. It's
something that we've put off talking about for a while that people have been asking us to address.
Yes.
We're kind of late to the party.
Yes.
But,
are we late?
No,
we're right on time.
No, because people be on they bull.
They be on
big
it.
time. So.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about this thing called critical race theory that we've alluded to, that we've tried to avoid for various reasons. But I mean, let's just do it. I want to pull up some material and some sources and some.
Wow, we're jumping right in.
Some things. Oh, you can go ahead and prep the people if you want. I'm gonna.
I mean, we are on live. I didn't warn you, but we are on live just now.
We are.
Give them a little sneak preview.
Right now. Yeah. What's up, everybody? What's up?
There's only two of them so far.
There's two of them, and Jen's probably one of them. So.
And one just left, so now there's only one.
Oh, he called us out. So, So speaking of, make sure you follow us on Instagram. And everything. So what I'm doing right now is I'm pulling up some of my some research that I've been doing on said critical race theory in the actual book. So, so critical race theory was coined and created by a group of lawyers. It's a law practice to basically highlight the impact of systemic racism and institutionalized racism. So it's a way for students to be able to take this theory and to assess different court cases,
right?
And use it as a tool to facilitate and see if we can track any patterns that may be impacting other cases or whatever the case may be.
Because they basically post-civil rights movement, post all of the legislation, bills, different things that happen, whether it be the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, and all these other acts and movements, affirmative action, all those different kind of things, business institution hiring, equal opportunity, employment kind of procedures, programs, looking and saying, okay, let's see what all of this legislation actually produced. See if it actually produced more equitable outcomes or less, or the same equitable, outcomes where there's gaps and disparities between the races.
Right. So it's basically a way of examining power structures.
It's not all that different than saying. I'm going to use terms or an illustration that's not part of technically CRT, but just looking at the word critical, which is at its base, it's critique. So they're just critiquing the outcomes of what was supposed to be legislation that brought about more racial equality and equity. Which, when we talk about critiquing, there's food critics. There's movie critics, there's book critics, where all they're doing is based upon just some foundational understandings of what, say, in food, food that tastes good or a good dining experience. What are some of the hallmarks of that, and rating, how the experience, the service, the food, obviously. With movies, there's a certain understanding of what makes for a good film. But also depending on the genre.
Right. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes, that's like to your point with films. Like
but Rotten Tomatoes is more like consumerism at its finest.
Well,
yum or yuck.
which will play a part into this whole
right
analysis of CRT.
Whereas actual
critics,
movie critics, people who've gone to school for critiquing, they're going to learn more about how films are produced, what makes a good story. So they're taking way more things into account. So, for example, I don't go to see Fast 9 expecting superior acting, expecting the kind of things that I might expect in what is considered an Oscar-worthy movie.
Okay.
Right?
Fair.
I just want to be entertained. Blow some stuff up, right? Have Dom give one of his hokey speeches about family.
Yeah.
And him gazing off into the sunset, thinking about Lord knows what, while holding a Corona. Right? I'm not expecting anything more than that.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas my expectations for Judas and the Black Messiah is completely different. I'm not looking for stuff to blow up. I'm not about entertainment. I'm not looking for it to be fast-paced. I'm looking for a story with superior acting, the way the story is told, how they tell the story, what part of the life they're, focused. You guys get the idea.
Yeah. But where are we going wrong in this conversation?
Well, and for those of you on Facebook Live, that's where you're going to have to listen to the rest of the podcast when we drop it. But you got a little sneak preview for now.
Got a little sneak preview. Peace out. See y'all on live. But yeah, we got to dive into what's happening. Like, what's all the rage, right? And I think when I say, what are we talking about? And I think that's intentionally stated because we're talking about two different things when it comes to the Rotten Tomato critics and folks, the consumers, and the consumer perspective, and the folks that are not necessarily experts in this field or in the legal field or just in general. Folks just have an opinion about things without actually knowing what they're talking about or haven't had read the material. I've run into so many people that have had such opinions about CRT, and I'm like, well, where did you find that what chapter did you find that in? And not to say that things can't be informed, and I don't know if you've read the book, but on the flip side, but you're not one of those people that are saying stuff that aren't even consistent with the idea and the concept in and of itself.
So let me rewind to my introduction to CRT. I'm on a Facebook thread with some people saying some racist.
In case you don't know, Cedric is the mayor of Facebook, in my opinion.
I will neither confirm nor deny the allegation. But I was on Facebook on somebody else's thread, and I forget what exactly it was about, but we were having a disagreement on some things and just trying to figure out exactly where the disagreement. It was all kosher. It was civil, right? It hadn't gotten out of hand. But then somebody, I can't remember if it was the original post or somebody else, said, "Oh, that sounds like critical race, or that sounds like CRT." And I'm like, "CRT? What's CRT?" So instead of asking, I asking research in the thread, I went on Google. I didn't do research. I just did a search.
Yeah.
What is CRT? And it came out as critical race theory. And I just said, I'm unfamiliar with critical race theory. I'm just sharing my own views and opinions based upon, and I reference Ibram Kendi. Well, Kendi's a critical race theorist. I'm like, dude's a historian. He's not a critical race theorist. He got a National Book Award for a book that was, in essence, a history book. That's all it was.
Right.
It wasn't putting forth any kind of theories, wasn't putting forth any kind of solutions, just demonstrating a pattern through history that race has been a feature of the United States of America. Race and racism, white supremacy has been a feature of America for a long time. And it's so pervasive that you have people who have said and done both things that are racist and things that are anti-racists, throughout their lives.
Right.
So he gave multiple and many examples of that. But and then with How to Be Anti-Racist, it was just a continuation of kind of his big takeaways from doing Stand from the beginning.
Right.
So to be all of a sudden told that I was just like, well, this is weird. But then it started to pop up more and more. And of course, by the time that one dude, that one fraud, basically said, hey, let's rebrand what CRT is and throw it around like the new socialism. And I'm not quoting him directly. I'm putting it in my own words. Right. But
thank you for accurately sourcing yourself.
Yes. Vody, that's how it's done.
Yeah.
He, of course, also gave out the clarion call to Trump to say, you got to do something about critical race theory. Next thing we knew, he made his little announcement and did the commissioning of the 1776 project or whatever they call it.
1619.
No, he didn't do 1619.
No.
He did 1776 to dismantle and dismiss the 1619.
Which is what
Nicole Hannah-Jones.
Yeah, which is what people like Vody Bakum does in one of his presentations on his book, what's it called?
Fault Lines.
Fault Lines. I was going to say
which is
false.
A very apt.
That's what I was going to say.
Fault Lines is an apt title given what's gone on.
Yeah. Especially
the fault lines are in the book.
Yeah, literally in the book. But his whole premise of like trying to debunk social justice and racism and all of this stuff, and the country being founded on racist principles, is he doesn't consider it being founded until 1776. And so if that's the case, then his whole premise is then America cannot be a racist country founded upon racism. But if you take the 1619 project of when slaves were brought here, then he basically says, okay, that's a different conversation. But his whole premise is to focus on that, as he's also trying to dismiss and dispel critical race theory. Now, the problem is, and there's an article that is surfacing, I think you posted it, and then and the guy McDuran or something like that, McDuron, I believe. I'm citing him correctly. If not, we'll find the article. He goes through an extensive critique of Vody Bakum's approach with CRT, which I would say is very consistent with a lot of white evangelicals. Generally speaking,
because he is a white evangelical.
Because he is a white evangelical
in brown skin,
and a lot of people are looking to him and said, voices like Tony Evans, to when it comes to CRT.
Tony Evans has had to come out more than once to clarify his statements.
Correct. Which I need to. Again, I'm taking it in loads, and right now I'm trying to get through the CRT book and these criticisms.
This dude over here doing his dissertation, he in deep.
Yeah, I'm in deep. So I'm trying not to bomb it too much. But basically, the problem is in general, and the lesson I think we can learn is it starts with, and again, I'll give you a little insight to where I'm at with my chapter. CRT and the criticisms that we're facing is, like, you have to understand, like, this is rooted in cognitive bias, right? Like people are coming to this conversation with a mental bias already, right? Mm-hmm. And then from that, in order to affirm that bias and to resist dissonance, I have to then confirm the bias that I already have. So I'm going to look for other labels like CRT to disguise my hatred for anti-racism work and anti-racism in general. Right. And all of this is to do what? To appease what I'm presenting as cognitive dissonance within folks. And there are different stages. And so I think what CRT has only exposed is the realities of, the power structures not wanting to go down without a fight. And people not wanting to really, really pursue an equitable and just society.
So I've quoted this quote many times, and I'm not going to pull it up right now, so I'm just going to remember it as best as I can. But I heard Mark Charles, who's an activist, do a talk at Q Conference in Boston 2015. At the beginning of he quoted Aboriginal leader in Canada, George Erasmus, who said, and I'm paraphrasing, where there is to be community, there needs to be a common memory. Where common memory is not shared, there cannot be, no community can be formed. Mm-hmm. And so it's basically saying that the reason why there's so much division, and particularly when it comes to race in America, is because we don't have a shared and common memory.
Right.
And all anti-racists are trying to do, or not all they're trying to do, but a big segment of anti-racists like Nicole Hannah-Jones, like Ibram X. Kendi, like Jamar Tisby, all they're trying to do is do exactly what I heard Mark Charles say he was going to do in his talk,
right,
which was reveal the blind spots in our common memory,
right,
so that we could create a common memory. That way we could then have community.
Right.
So what they're really fighting against is not CRT at all.
Right.
What they are fighting against is these blind spots being revealed, and a common memory, a more accurate memory or history being created and shared.
Which goes back to my point of it's because you've already formed a conscious bias and perspective, and it's because you've been influenced a certain way, you've been wired a certain way, you've been trained to think a certain way.
Well, I mean, I would say that they've seen the success of it's had, and that they don't want the kind of community that's going to be formed through the common memory. They want to maintain
I'm the oppressor, so what incentive? If I'm the oppressor and it's working for me, then I'm affirming what you're saying.
Right.
But if I'm the oppressor and it's working for me, then I have no incentive to come down to the level of the oppressed. So,
but see, yeah, you're right.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's the thing. It's not even about coming down to the oppressed. It's the oppressed coming up to me.
Well, there you go.
And the oppressed, let's keep it 100, is not for the elite. Is not, nor has it ever been, only people of color.
Correct.
It has also been white people on the margins in the working class.
Yeah.
So that's where the cognitive biases come in, and they play to the hallmarks of authoritarian leadership.
Yeah.
Confidence bias, right? Which I did the sermon we talked about, which give a lie confidently told is easier to believe than a humble truth.
That's so good.
Yeah. So then comes in the conspiracy bias, which is basically another thing that says, hey, those of us in the position of power are actually oppressed. We're the victims, and we're not safe. There's this evil that's trying to get us or take advantage of us, and we got to protect ourselves against what that is. So the confidence bias, the lie, right, is that these anti-racists are trying to undo America. They're trying to reshape America in ways that's not going to be beneficial. But the conspiracy is, I'm mixing them up. The lie is that CRT, they're trying to push CRT. That's the lie.
Right.
The conspiracy is that they are trying to tell, tear down our society. They're a bunch of socialists, Marxists who just want to ruin and destroy and upend America.
So with that being said, so what do we do with the fact that historically we've seen that every movement of liberation, equality, justice, whatever the case may be, it's always been met with some form of backlash. So like things like critical race theory, because in my mind, like as I read the book, I've tried to stay away from conversations and other voices so that I could purely read the text for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, I don't think the text is intended for like I felt like it was written with tunnel vision to focus on law and what it was presenting. But
that's just it. The backlash and the rage is not against critical race theory.
Right.
It's not. So in some ways, like while you need to read it for your dissertation work,
right,
it is otherwise a waste of your time.
Right.
To actually deal with what is actually going on. Not a complete waste of your time, but a waste from this standpoint that the rage is not against CRT. The rage is against the progress that has been made in the fact that last year, Black Lives Matter movement finally went over 50% approval rating in national polls. It's against the fact that you've seen this huge boom and increase in interest in voices like Jamar Tisby, like Tyler Burns, like Ibram X. Kendi, like Nicole Hannah-Jones, like Allie Henney, like Corey Lee, like all these different people that we've had on our podcast and other podcasts that we listen to, Andre Henry. I mean, you can go right, all these different people who have written these books, like those books all dominated the bestsellers lists for a solid like 2-3 months, right?
Yeah.
After George Floyd was murdered, which was on the heels of hearing about Breonna Taylor, which was on the heels of watching the video of what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. Yeah. So the backlash is to that, but no one's gonna sit there in their right mind with a straight face thinking that it would be embraced. Hey, we gotta do something about the fact that all of a sudden all these white people have actually become sympathetic towards the plight, current day plight of black people, and seeing it within the greater context and history of race in America. We can't allow that to happen for people to actually become sympathetic and want to actually start joining them and becoming, allies and co-conspirators and being in solidarity with black people. You can't say that, because what's going to happen? If you say that right away, people are going to be like, you is racist as Hell. Right? You racist as hell. I don't know why I'm spelling it. But you racist. You are like, you're basically proving their point. No, you got to call it something else. But you got to call it something that people, it is so outside of the normal discourse in knowledge of people that you can define it as anything and people will believe you. It's got a catchy name. It's easy to abbreviate. And you start talking about, critical race theory. But then they start grabbing from some of the random comments or voices that are on the very extremes, right? And saying that is what makes up critical race theory. And that's what these people, right, are basically putting into the ether, and we need to stop them because they're basically, and this is what they say, which is not true. They are saying that all white people are racist, that white people are corrupt, they're quote unrighteous, or they can't be righteous, right?
Which is what Vody says.
Which was Vody was saying that some of the critical race theorists were saying,
the word righteous is not in the book at all.
Not at all. And so they're making all these accusations, and because people don't know anything about critical race theory, but there's always been this latent fear. We've talked about it before, right? One of the oldest racist ideas is that black people are one day going to rise up and give it as good as they've gotten.
Yeah. Man, I hope y'all enjoyed that homily by Cedric.
Where were you on the keys? You missed your cue.
I'm going to add them in. Don't you worry. I was already. That's what I was thinking. I was like, I can't play them out loud because it'll mess up the audio. But you better believe I'm going to go back in there and add it.
Word.
No, man, like that's spot on. That's spot on. And I think, again, like we're just going to see these things continue to manifest, and we'll see something in the next couple of years. It won't be CRT. CRT will eventually die. It'll be the next thing, but it's all going to still deal with the same fundamental issue of not allowing people to participate in true solidarity and to demonstrate sympathy. And so I just wonder, like what should people do with this conversation in general with CRT. Obviously, my approach is to, number one, disengage. Number two, man, pay attention to the patterns and the signs of history repeating itself. Because again, I'm hearing these conversations about, BLM and critical race theory and white fragility, but I'm also knee deep in the civil rights movement, and I'm like, I don't know which freaking decade I'm in. Because it's the same
things.
Same thing. Communism, socialism, same thing. Black power, black lives, national threat to security.
Sure, you want to take it, all the way back to post-Civil War, Negroes and taking over the government and these carpetbaggers, that help them. Right, all the Reconstruction and Redemption era, which led straight into the lynching era.
Yeah.
I mean, things that we've talked about, again, it's just a pattern repeating itself. But to answer your question, how do we address it, or how do we go about dealing with it? You said disengage. I'm gonna put my preacher hat on for a minute, but when I look at Jesus sending out the 72, he said, go into the town, deliver this message of the good news, and if they receive it, stay a while.
Yeah.
Be welcomed into their home, basically treat them like family. Like, if they extend, the hand of fellowship to you, then by all means, embrace it.
Right.
But if they reject you, if they reject the message, if they tell you, try to just, turn around, wish them well.
Dust off your feet.
Right? Knock the dust off your sandals and move to the next town.
Yeah.
And that's been my approach, is because it's such a diversion tactic. It's like the counter in football,
and switch.
Right?
It's the hokey doke. It's the sleight of hand. Again.
Right. Get all their momentum moving in one direction, and then plant that foot and explode in the other direction.
Yep.
Right. So my whole thing is I'm not falling for the okie doke.
Yep.
I'm just not even gonna spend a lot of time debating these folks, because ultimately that's what they want. If we're spending more time debating them than continuing to do what we need to do to be together and have oneness with the folks who want a common memory, so that we can have real and true community, then they've gotten what they want.
Yeah. So how does this conversation, you think, play into people in the uproar about CRT in the schools and stuff?
Listen.
Again, I have my thoughts of it going, and my thoughts would literally regurgitate what you just said.
Right. They on they bullshit.
Yeah.
Because there is not one school in America, not one K through 12 school in America, public school in particular, that is actually teaching CRT.
Right.
They are not teaching critical race theory. None of those scholars' work is being used as textbooks or references. Listen, most of the schools in the South are still teaching a history that is sympathetic towards those who literally betrayed and left the country. Those traitors, otherwise known as the Confederates.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me that schools that we can't even get to stop telling Confederate apologists history are also teaching critical race theory?
Right.
We can't even get them to tell the truth about the place of the Confederacy in the Civil War.
Right.
They're still teaching that slavery was good for black folks.
Right.
You mean to tell me some of those schools, like in Texas, where they've banned critical race theory, we're teaching critical race theory in schools?
Yeah.
Again, I've been saying a lot lately. Shout out to my street leader, Emma, because I got it from her. But, the math ain't mathin'.
Yeah.
Bro, even heard of critical race theory.
Until you were called one.
Until I was called one. And I had to go and figure out, what is this? I didn't know whether to be insulted, to be complimented, or what. I had to go look it up.
Yeah.
Many of us did last year.
Uh-huh.
So, Nah.
Yeah.
Again, but you know what it'll accomplish? It'll get them votes in the eyes of the people who have never liked any of this when black people started standing up and speaking up for their dignity.
Right.
Didn't like any of it when Colin Kaepernick and then a whole bunch of athletes behind him started taking a knee during the national anthem.
Right.
The same people who don't have boo to say, right? Oh, they were all about, Blue Lives Matter and, support the police and and they have not said boo since January 6th about what happened.
Nope.
They didn't have nothing to say during all last week when they had testimony being given by the Capitol police officers for the hearings of the January 6th hearings. Haven't said a boo. I called them out. They still haven't said boo.
Oh, no. They're not. Nah, they're in hibernation. You remember that there was a time after the Civil War Reconstruction where a lot of particularly, conservative evangelicals or Christians just went silent until, the 50s and 60s. That's when the moral majority and religious right formed. So they're just in hibernation, recovering from the ass whooping. But you better believe 2024, they're coming hard. Yeah, it's bad. And again, I'm intentionally talking in the us versus them language, but that's not necessarily.
That's not your view. But that's not my view.
That's just the way.
That's how they view it.
That's how. Yeah, anybody that disagrees with them is against them. So I'm already classified in the us.
Right, which we know because we were in those circles.
Right. Aside from skin color or whatever, you disagree and you're out. So,
right.
So again, with critical race theory, when I say disengage, I'm more or less saying disengage with stupid people. I'm to the point I'm not having conversations with people where as Cedric just beautifully stated the words of Jesus, where I just need to leave the house, dust my feet off, and keep it moving.
Yeah, I'm not going to interact with people who are being intentionally disingenuous.
And most of those people that are so outspoken about it are just downright narcissists. And you're not going to reason with a narcissist.
But some of them are just honestly misled because
fair.
That's the whole point behind it. Confidence.
I'm sorry. I'm speaking
bias.
from the ones that I am citing and thinking I'm having to. So I am literally talking about narcissists and public figures that are so, enamored with this.
But they're right. We know they're frauds.
Yeah.
But they are convincing, or they're causing some people to press pause,
right,
and be unsure
of
who is right and who is wrong.
Yeah.
Because I see posts where people is like, well, point me towards an unbiased source. I'm like, just read history. Go get a history text.
Right.
Well, I don't want someone else's opinion. They're not giving opinion. They're giving history.
Yeah, just look at the footnotes and the citations, and if they're not coming from a ton of primary sources, then sure.
Or, I don't know, if they're just stating what happened without giving their own personal commentary.
Right.
Because, there's some dudes to be footnoting, and as, again, your boy
Bodie is under
gave plenty of footnotes.
Yeah, man.
Which is why it made it easier to see that dude is both plagiarizing and misquoting people.
Right, facts. But if you are looking at history texts, The Color of Law and A Short History of Reconstruction are the two books that I would highly, highly, highly recommend you read.
If you're going to do Stand from the Beginning, you might want to do audio. That bad boy's thick.
Yeah, Stand from the Beginning is dense.
But it's dense.
So, but any other takes on CRT?
I'm just exhausted by it. I really am. I'm just really, really exhausted by it. Here's a parallel. It would be like saying, right, that the movie industry, Hollywood, is struggling not because we just had a year where most movie theaters' doors were closed due to a pandemic.
Right.
It would be like blaming how Hollywood is struggling on movie critics. And say it's the movie critics' fault.
Right.
They are the problem.
Yeah.
They just want to see Hollywood burn.
Yeah.
Right? And they're the ones that caused this whole problem.
Right.
The movie critics ain't got nothing to do with it.
Right.
They're just critics. They're literally analyzing the work. It would be like saying that food critics are the reason why so many restaurants had to close this year.
Yeah.
Say nothing about how,
I'm gonna have to quote you on this one.
Again, the pandemic closed a lot of restaurants for so long. The folks literally ran out of money, went bankrupt. Forget the fact that the way that for a lot of restaurant staff, either the income is not much or it's really unstable, depending on tips, right?
Yeah.
So they were able to either find a job